There are several tips I guess I would offer that I think we try to practice here in the department and things that I've learned over the years. One of those would be the importance of clarity and organization in your syllabus, on your course management site, in your assignments. There's no good substitute for being clear and organized for the students. Having said that, I think you also have to remember to be flexible and empathetic. We have to remember that sometimes what we're teaching and what we're asking of students isn't easy of them. And they're all kind of at different points in terms of where they're at with this learning. I've learned over the years that trying to be flexible, trying to meet students where they're at, remembering to treat them as adults, but also as people who are still figuring this out, can do a lot more in terms of ultimately having the sort of impact that we're trying to have. I would add, I think you have to be reasonable in what you're really trying to teach. We all want to teach good writing. We all want to develop critical thinking skills in addition to the content we're trying to deliver. But we can't always do all of those things in a single class. So you have to think carefully about what is it that I most want students to learn here, and then make that your primary goal, with some of those other things perhaps being secondary to some of your efforts. And then one last tip I would provide that's I think especially relevant or assumed of folks teaching in communication is we have to be responsive. We have to be responsive to students. We have to role model good communication as the instructors here. And again, I think that helps set up our students to be the sort of effective communicators that we want them to be.
In SLHs, we prepare clinical professionals. In order to be an ethical, good clinical professionals, we have to focus on compassion, on collaboration, and on ethics in our classes. In addition to things like, of course, things like understanding, things like application, and things like questioning or critical thinking.
I think one of the best ways that faculty members can really realize their potential as teachers is to think about what to think about what you've struggled with, what you struggled with as a learner, what you struggled with as a student, because the things that you struggled with the most are probably the things that you're best able to teach, because you know what it's like to have zero knowledge or to have zero confidence. And so, as you reflect on that, you think, well, what really helped me to reach the level that I'm at now? How did somebody really make this accessible to me? Or how did somebody build my confidence to the point where I feel efficacious, like that I could actually do this thing that somebody taught me to do? So I think it's really important to reflect on that. I've also learned over time that one of the best ways to connect with students is to try to find really meaningful ways to connect with all the different ways that students arrived at UT. So, not just being able to reflect on your particular journey, even though that's what I just said was a good tip, stepping away from that, thinking broadly about all of the different ways in which students have faced challenges to get here to UT is really helpful for making sure that you're not just speaking to one particular audience in your classroom, but that you're speaking to all your students there.
So another thing that we do in RTF is that we have classroom observations that are conducted by a fellow faculty member, by a colleague. This gives the professor, the instructor in question, real substantive feedback in terms of how she, he, they are performing in the classroom, things that maybe wouldn't be immediately recognizable by the person who's actually teaching the class. So to get that kind of constructive criticism in the form of a peer evaluation is really, really very helpful. At the end of each semester, students will also fill out their course instructor surveys, and instructors can glean various bits of information and feedback that can be helpful for revamping an existing course.
I'm always still learning about teaching, even though I teach a course on teaching. I think listening. The more we can listen, which means the less we're talking, the more that it is an engagement, that it's a dialogue, that the students are, again, getting to the conclusions you want them to, or allow them to tell you something you don't know. So I would say that's something that I'm still working on. And of course, there's the good old practice of don't repeat your PowerPoints. And, it sounds obvious, but I think so many of us still sort of do that. Here's PowerPoint. Here we are reading it. So that fine line of what do you really want the students to absorb? And again, it could depend on the level and how you want to engage. I saw this great quote that, teaching is the co-construction of knowledge. And I think that's the co part that we're all trying to emphasize